Hello, everyone. Happy Tuesday. We've got a great event for you today, and we'll get started shortly. Just to give people a few more minutes to join. Uh, Before we get started, if you want to, feel free to put into the chat, where are you calling from today? And we'll just get started. We'll wait 2 or 3 more minutes, and we'll get started shortly. Well, once again, welcome to the Blameless Fireside Chat webinar series. My name is Lee Atchison, and I'm the Chief Reliability Officer at Blameless. Before we get started, if you have any questions during the webinar, please put them in the chat, and we'll try to get to them during the course of the event. We have both Aaron and Sarah from listening in from Blameless. If you have any problems, they'll be glad to take care of you, and they'll be posting links and things like that in the chat during the course of the webinar as well. I'd also like to mention our latest case study that's just recently came out, and that's for Bamboo HR. Aaron, do you want to start out by putting a link to that in the chat? And now I'd like to introduce my guest. My guest today is Devon Lash. Devon is the principal IT specialist at Trustengine. Trustengine is a blameless customer, and we're going to be talking about the secret to being a successful change agent in IT operations. Devon, welcome, and thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, Lee. And just remember, just go by Lash on that one for that.
That's right. We'll just call you Lash. That's right. Thank you. Yeah, he wants to be called Lash. We'll go with that. Um, for our listeners, can you tell me a bit about yourself and your background?
Yeah, absolutely. So as we said, my name is Devon Lash, but I go by Lash. The fun story with that is there were always two Devons when I grew up, and I'm a huge soccer fan. As you can see behind me, I coach and play still to the day. So I've just gone by Lash. It's always easier when you have to not say the same name. So I am the principal IT specialist here at Trustengine. We are a performance marketing company, and my background has been in IT for over 10 plus years in both the academic and in the private sector now. And I've kind of lived, eat, and breathed it for my whole life.
So your background both um, in training as well as in standard IT in training as well as operations within the IT field. Is that correct?
Yeah, I've done everything from starting the setup of, back in the day with service, many people started in the help desk on a level one, being able to understand that all the way up through now being the principal IT specialist. So I've seen the training, the adoption, how to enable things, how to provision things, how to help it, the whole breadth and depth of it, kind of seen it on a level. And again, both in the academic environment for those that are in it, which is a very different world in comparison to the private sector, which you can definitely do, as I've learned a lot more in than you could in the academic environment, and getting people to buy into it as well, which is why I love the fact that I'm able to partner with Blameless and be able to do it, because it is a great tool that we use here at Trustengine.
Cool, cool. So best practices is something you're very familiar with. You spend a lot of time helping people with best practices. Would that be
Yeah.
a fair statement?
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely. Especially since we are, and I probably should mention that Trustengine is in the financial technology space of that one. So we're a fintech company. So we do a lot with banks and lending institutions, loan officers, all about financial freedom. And it's kind of like the shirt here. It says "No borrower left behind" is one of our mottos of a performance marketing tool. But really, what we have is a small team. We're a small medium business. So being able to provide best practices, efficient solutions, and being able to get right to the source, especially when as for my team, we're a team of three overall in the compliance side, but I'm the only IT person that we have on the IT operations and identity access management. Best practices really help us to sort of not only standardize for things like our SOC compliance, SOC 2, we're a SOC 2 type 2 company, but at the same time also making sure that when we have anything that goes on, whether it be from standardizing and incident management, like Blameless helps us do, or for things like purchases of laptops, making sure end users get the provisioning they need. The best practices is something we live, eat, and breathe, because we just don't have that bandwidth to be able to have all those sort of users to help us with certain things. So the faster we can get things done, the efficiently we can get them done while staying compliant is a huge deal for us. And we really strive to achieve that here at Trustengine.
Yeah, the processes help you not only being able to do it efficiently, which is great, but also, as you mentioned, security compliance, which is really important in your industry.
Yeah, exactly. Like I said,
Yeah.
being especially having to have that SOC 2 Type 2 compliance, that's such a huge deal. And anybody who's worked in a space, as I'm sure many of us have as professionals, we're always dealing with either whether it's SOC 2 Type 2, you're going into ISO, you're doing FINRA if you're having those ones, or back in my education days, we had FERPA, HIPAA to some extent. So you're always having to find a way of how can you achieve the goals you want to achieve technologically, but also not get caught for something you shouldn't have done or you didn't know. So you have to make sure you balance that, which is, as I'm sure we all know, not an easy task to do by any days, especially if you're not working with large teams involved in it.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. So before Blameless, before you looked at Blameless, moved to being a Blameless customer, what challenges were you facing from an IT perspective operationally at Trust Engine?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So I should preface a little bit that when we were before Trustin, we were known as Sales Boomerang Mortgage Coach, and then we eventually rebranded to be Trustengine as we've grown the company, acquisitions and such. So when we originally got Blameless, or we were looking at Blameless, I should say, on that one, a big challenge we had is how do you handle incidences that come up? Partly, it is something that you need to be able to report on for anything, whether you're a SOC compliance or anything of that nature. You have to be able to way to track the incidents, show that you're able to respond to them, show that you're able to remedy them, and how your team works on doing it. But another bigger challenge that we had in that is just the communication alone. Now, when this originally was looking at it, Sales Boomerang Mortgage Coach, we were a smaller company going from a startup through the whole process to getting to the small medium business where we are today. But a lot of it was how do you get the right people involved, right? That is half the challenge. Maybe it isn't always just engineering that has to do it. It was originally looked at as when engineering would be, all right, there's a problem with the product, engineering is going to take care of it. Well, that's true. That's definitely true. But there's also more elements that go in. Does the executive need to get involved? Do we need to have our sales teams involved? Do we need to have our customer success involved, who are making sure that our customers are aware that we either have an outage or there's something that may or may not be working correctly in a system that they're viewing, or maybe there's just a random outage that we can't control, but it affects how our product works on that. So that's when it really was sort of a challenge of, okay, we have Slack, as I'm sure many people do in the world of these days of the modern IT infrastructure, but really looking at it going, what was going to be that most efficient way of being able to get the right people involved for when an incident occurs and to reduce that downtime as much as possible. So that way we get back onto it. Our customers are impacted as at least as possible. and everybody moves on when we can try, and we can learn from it as well, which is also huge because you just, whether it is something you can control or not control, it's always something you want to be able to go back and say, what could we do better? Maybe you couldn't, but it's always something you want to be able to say.
So let's walk through a specific example. Not necessarily a specific incident, but a specific process flow through an incident. Before Blameless, when an incident occurred, walk me through in a little bit more detail. What did you do? And while we're going through that, why don't you point out where there were struggles that you needed to work on, you needed to improve.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. So kind of we'll call it the pre-blameless era. We were pretty much, if there was an incident that occurred, we would get that from Zendesk. Zendesk is where our customers are usually emailing our support team. Our support team would get a bunch of people in a Slack message, whether it was a group or maybe there was a Slack channel, and been like, hey, we're seeing this go on. What's wrong with this? Or, hey, we're noticing that customers can't sign into the platform or customers aren't seeing the data that they're looking at. And then you'd get more people added in and more people added in, and they're scrolling through this, and people are asking, well, what's the status of this? Or I don't know, read back on this one. And meanwhile, all this is going on, tick, 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 tick. It was just a big Slack channel, big mess. Engineering's trying to handle it on one side. Our customer success team is trying to handle it on another. Our, executives are like, hey, where are things at? It was kind of a little bit chaotic on that one. And it just really wasn't an efficient way. Did it get done at the end? Sure. But it was definitely not what I would consider a best practice. And it was not something that was being done at a way of turning things around quickly at that when ahead time.
So your incident response time, it took a while to even realize there was an incident, and then the resolution was a lot slower than it could have been because you were coordinating very well.
Right. Or
Is
we
that
didn't have the
fair?
right
Fair
people
summary?
getting involved that needed to be involved because it was like, oh, this person handles it. Let's get them in the call. Or, oh, actually, this was this person. Let's get them in the call. When, maybe if we just had that originally instead of kind of being like, oh, yeah, that's the person to go to and make our lives a lot quicker if we had the right people get there at the first time.
Got it. So escalation process as well as communication and being able to give the right level of information to the right people at the right time. Those are kind of the core issues that you were dealing with.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely some core issues we had, like in the pre-blameless.
So you're a fully remote office as well. Is that correct?
100%. Yep. Been for
Did
post.
that post pandemic
Yeah, yeah. So
fully
like
blameless?
immediately as soon as COVID hit, pretty much within I would say within a couple months of that, totally remote, 100% since 2021, I believe, if I remember
Got it.
correctly.
Got it. So before then, though, you weren't. You were in office.
Yeah,
So
there
most
was
of
an
these were these conversations all occurring in office in person as well, or were they still all going on Slack? Did did,
mostly.
did the
Go ahead.
I guess what I'm really trying to get to is going to the remote office model. Did that make things worse, better, or really didn't have any effect because you were still doing the same things?
Yeah, great question. And part of this too is we were two separate companies at that time too. We were Mortgage Co,
Right. Right.
which was a fully separate entity that didn't necessarily use the product or had their own methods, and Sales Boomerang at that time, which was sort of kind of doing a little bit of both, using Slack, having an in-person office, and in that time, we'll call it the 2021 timeframe, the team of the whole company and that sort of one in the smaller era, you could fit them within a normal office space. So probably, 20 to 30 people max on that one that you could go and say, hey, I'm seeing this issue. What are you seeing? Oh, let's talk about it. Let's whiteboard it. Let's try to be able to get those. So there was a little bit of Slack communication, maybe some email back and forth, but you could go physically see someone. Post moving to that one, I absolutely say it made some things better in sense, but definitely more challenging. Not only bringing in another company into our fray and making that together as one to one, but now you got people from different time zones. You got people in different areas that we have. If a CSM is on the East Coast and a developer's on the West Coast, we got a 3 hour difference in time zone. And that was a big challenge for us as well. So I really would say, well, some things definitely got better, remote work and, that's all the things that come with it. But the challenges of getting the right people involved, especially when an incident occurs, as soon as you notice one, clock starts on that one, no matter what time zone you're in.
Yeah. I imagine it might have helped in some respect because more people, I'm thinking specifically like the sales force, right? The sales force could be more involved in your incidents because you're using remote management tools
Sure.
versus before when you were doing it all in person. Is that also a fair statement? Or
Yeah, there was definitely, and then you are right. There is some that add into it as well. So that way, when you're having that, yeah, now you got this bigger pool, you got more people involved, more people are looking into it. You do
yeah.
have the higher visibility than what you had of, 20 some odd individuals at the time working on it. But with the challenge of now, just because you have more people doesn't mean it's getting done quicker, causes a little bit more chaos because now you got other parties added in, different areas of the businesses are growing, and such and so on and so forth.
So, what was the trigger that led you to look at Blameless,
Kind of two.
or more generically, the type of tool that Blameless is?
Yeah, so
You
yeah.
evaluated other options, but
Oh,
what
sure.
brought you
So
to the need for that tool?
yeah, so two parts to that really came to why we were evaluating incident management tools and the kind of the space. The first part being it is a compliance thing, like we talked about before. If you are going towards, we originally were SOC 1, we wanted to look at becoming SOC 2 on this. It is something that you have to be able to present as part of your SOC audit of how do you handle incidences, how are you coming up, how are they triaged, what's the process, so on and so forth. So there was that one, but also in the sense of how do you handle an incident? How do you make it more efficient? How do you handle it? So it's now we are like you're talking about. We're a fully remote company now. How do we make this more of an efficient process of that one? How do we look at it to go and say, how do we get the right people involved when we need to have them involved when an incident occurs? How do we are getting those bigger teams involved when they are in three coasts and that one plus externally with some contractors that were in Ukraine, I believe, which we still have. So we also have another country involved of trying to get in another time zone. So that's where we were looking at of different ones, and looked at the major ones in the industry. Incident IO, you had Blameless, I believe we looked at Ops Genie and Fire Hydrant, I believe was another one that had come up, and they kind of gave through an evaluation period of what one do we use on that, and that's kind of where that was where they ended up picking at that time, and it was kind of before my decision of it, but they decided Blameless was the best one in the industry to use.
Okay, so before we get too far down the decision process and moving to Blameless, let's look at the issues that were driving you to the tool. You mentioned two separate things, and they were both important. One is compliance. Moving from SOX 1 to SOX 2 is critical. So the compliance issue involved with adding incident response was important to your business model. But two, you also mentioned improved incident response in general. You wanted to have a more formalized process. You wanted to be more inclusive in the ability to communicate better overall and just handle incidents quicker, faster, etc. So those are two separate reasons, hopefully very related reasons, but they're separate reasons. What do you think was the primary driver? Was it the compliance, but you saw benefits, or was it the benefits, but also you saw compliance?
I think it originally started with the compliance because it was something like, oh gosh, this was something we didn't exactly anticipate when we had the SOC 2. Like you're going through all these ones, you're like, all right, we need this. We need a tool to be able to handle this. But then to your point, we did start to see the benefits of what this could do. It was like, okay, sure. At a very, very core level, you could do the incident management tool. That's great. That's just one layer of this onion on this. But then we started seeing about how could we start getting the communication? Maybe we can add more people involved in the right times and we're not having to do it as manually. It's a little bit more automated now in the one. Now we can start tying in Zoom. We can tie in, we don't have to make a Zoom meeting for it. We can tie in Jira, for example, being as most probably people are. Everyone's at Atlassian shop these days for a lot of their one, whether it's on-prem or cloud. So then it started to realize like, oh, wow, there's actually a lot of features here that are using and not just the basic, okay, an incident started, we can put the right information in, get those ones and sort of have the compliance sense, which is always great. But now we have this, oh, there's these added benefits to it. This is great. This is exactly what we're looking for. And kind of in relation to what we were saying before with how things are done, it tied into Slack. So it really wasn't a
Right.
major shift away from how things had been done. It was just a little bit of a different twist to it. And then once again, you start seeing like, oh, well, we can get the right people involved. We can have this done sort of automatically once we start the incident. Started catching a little more fire that way.
Got it. So it's rather interesting that compliance requirements were actually a positive business driver for you, not just from the standpoint of having the compliance, which is necessary for your business, but you actually saw real benefits from from implementing the tool. Even though you were implementing something for compliance reasons, you saw benefits from it that helped you from a straight business or cultural or team standpoint as well.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly.
Yeah. So let's talk about the decision process itself. So you decided you needed some sort of instant response process. You were evaluating competitors. This was, I believe, back in 2022. Um, what was the primary driver that ultimately led your company to pick Blameless over Fire Hygiene Incident, .io, OpsGD, any of the other ones?
Yeah, no, that's definitely one. I think what ended up being, obviously, I'll put the the financial one out there. Always cost. There's always that benefit to it, that one of I'm sure where they're evaluating X amount of users versus X cost. How's that ROI work? But on past that point, which you could always negotiate and have those parts, the features that Blameless had to us to date was probably the one major thing of what keeps us with this platform even today, as we've seen as the platform grows and redone it. It's what they can offer, what it has, the sort of the speed to need at this point of when an instance occurs. It's not taking us this massive lift to have to do this from, like I said, we utilize our Slack instance very heavily in this company, and it's something that we really focus on just because we communicate for different things across the board, is more than just what's your lunch today, but all the way from how customers are handling and so on and so forth. But on top of that, it was the fact that there was so much integration that Blameless had with the tools that we were already using, and how easy it was for us to have our customer support team or our customer success team, when they saw something come in, because they were generally the first ones who always saw something, be able to get this off the ground, get that incident going. And then it's like, great, now we do have these people in. I'm already getting these ones. I'm not having to manually add 17 people to a channel and create this one. It's doing that for me. It's creating that war room. It's creating that retrospective that we want to look at if finally, once we get into that space of it, and keeping all this information in one spot versus might have been in some in Zendesk, some in Jira. There's no link to it, so it was really helpful for us to kind of wrap this all together, and that ultimately is what led us to say Blameless was the best tool, because it did that to when we evaluated it as the best option for us.
So creating the communication channels, automation, and the whole process of automating everything and keeping everything in one spot. Was that a good summary?
Yeah,
Did I miss
absolutely.
did I miss something there? Okay.
Nope.
Um, so this evaluation occurred in 2022, and you ended up um, picking a tool in 2022, and you rolled it out. But it wasn't an easy rollout for you. Do you want to you want to talk a little bit about the rollout process and things you would maybe do differently this time when if you roll it out again,
Yeah,
roll out something
absolutely.
like it
So
again?
while it was originally bought, and there were many uh, teams, members involved with it. Unfortunately, we didn't have the whole company involved in that. And when I say the whole company, I kind of talk like the kind of the key leaders when we originally had purchased this. So when we rolled this out, while it was a great tool for our support team and the engineering team, there's so much other things that it could do with it that we didn't really get to utilize right off the bat, because honestly, a lot of people didn't know we had it on that. It wasn't something
Hmm.
that had been uh, known about, that we were looking at this incident management tool. We just had it because we were going through that, again, that compliance part of it. So once we got it sort of rolling out on that one, and now we've refined it and really tweaked it and started doing it, now it's like, wow, this is a great tool for us to use and really powerful to our business. Going back, I would definitely say, if I were to do it again or kind of have a re-onboarding on that one, would really get those key stakeholders involved. Like, maybe not just, the CFO, obviously, for a contract signing or a legal sort of thing, but really looking at, can we get more of customer success, marketing? Do we get our engineering leaders, our product leaders on that one? And not to have 37 people in a meeting, because that's not very helpful on that one, but the ones that would really drive this and really start to understand, like, the more people you can get involved, and I say more people, the more right people that are involved in this, the quicker that you're going to have respond to that incident, because it's not a matter of when you're going to have one or if you're going to have one. It's going to happen on this. It's how quickly can you handle it on that. And then that's what's really for us especially now in the modern era, especially as we grow our business, and that's something that we really take seriously about how quickly can we respond, how well can we make sure that communication is, whether it's got to go out to that customer or maybe it's just an internal event that occurs, like how much can we do it, and just seeing the power that it has from all these different things that really wasn't totally realized until like later on when we sort of IT operations got involved in it, sort of helped with our DevOps team and handling some of those. And they started to realize that, especially when I got involved in looking at it, going, there's a lot of use here on this that we could use. And if we really branch this out, our teams can really get some good communication and right communication and getting the things done so that way we do get this incident cleared up as quick as possible. So ultimately, to sort of summarize that, it would have been like when you really onboard a platform and you're really looking at this as a company, it's not just engineering pick something and we're stick with it, right? Well, that's sure, of course, of that one, but really is for something like this where an incident affects everyone in the company, no matter what it is on that one, making sure that those leaders understand that this is why you get in the channels and this is why we have those people involved and this is why we have the different levels of severities, which I'm sure many people are know how that goes. And that's why we really started to, utilize this a lot more and gain more adoption once we got that down. So that's something I would have probably added, that getting that maybe those original sales calls or those original ones, which some of those happened even before I was part of the company, and really starting to, see that, oh, wow, we do have something here that we could use. And it's more than just oh yeah, we got an incident. Great on that one, how we handle it kind of thing.
So I imagine part of the path that you took, since you started out as it being a compliance tool, compliance play versus a improvement play. Since you started that route, that might have slowed part of the process down, since it was only a compliance tool. There wasn't a lot of need, a pent up need to change processes to make things better or anything. People didn't know that there was benefits to using a tool like this initially, and so that helped slow down the process of adoption. But if your company would have seen some of this pain initially and then rolled out the tool, forgetting about compliance for a moment, there might have been a quicker adoption because people saw the pain and saw what a tool might be able to do. Is that a fair statement, or am I misrepresenting what you're saying?
No, I'd say that's a fair statement, especially because, like I said, that it's all about getting the right people involved and not just seeing it, but understanding it too. And that one is not
Yeah.
just the parts of it. So yeah, I would agree. That's a fair assessment of it. So that would definitely be how, if we could redo it. And obviously, it's tough to know. Let's go back then and how we're gonna do.
Right.
But yeah, especially seeing like what we're doing now and how we're able to utilize this and really sort of be successful with the platform to date. I kind of almost wish we, could take Blameless now and how is it then, and, kind of go forward. But,
Got
we
it.
still make it work today. And that one, I'm very happy to have it.
Cool. Good. Good. So you're from an IT standpoint, you're it, right? You're the one person IT shop. Um, so given that there's not a large IT organization, um, the coordination that you're talking about is mostly with other teams. Is that correct?
Oh, what was that last part? Sorry, I didn't hear the
Uh,
last
the,
one.
sure. The coordination that you're talking about that you need to do during incident response is mostly with other teams. It's not helping IT itself coordinate with IT because you are IT, but it's helping the coordination with the other teams. I just want to clarify that what you're talking about when you're talking about coordination improvements, it's company-wide coordination improvements and not just the managing of a specific incident and the technical aspects of it. Not
Correct.
just that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
correct. It's company wide, from anywhere from, like I said, marketing, finance, sales, customer success, engineering, product, all are the key components in that.
So from an IT standpoint, though, just from the IT side, so yeah, again, it's not the communication benefits with Blameless because you're the only IT person other than the external communication, but internally, what were some of the greatest feature drivers that helped you, the IT team, um, that Blameless helped with? In other words, in the smaller world, in the small, what was Blameless able to help you with?
Oh, that's a great thing. Yeah, especially being the small team on that one. It's, we oversee the platform, but we don't have time to constantly jump, totally focus on that one system. So really one of the big things Blameless helps us do, especially as that one is, we've gone through as a company and sort of looked at it, kind of talking about best practices on that, really defined what our incidences are. And that was something that was done on a company-wide level, looking at it going, when we have something to occur, how do we define it from what severity, from severity X all the way up to severity Z on that one, being like, how do we look at it and go, this is what we're handling. So once we were able to get that in the system and be able to define those severities, it was great. And one of the benefits to us is that I can, with the Slack integration involved, make sure that the people that are defined in these spaces, that should be that original, let's say 6 to 7 individuals that need to be in that first contact based on the severity, are in that channel. That maybe we're not bringing in those extra ones that aren't involved, or maybe we're not bringing in those executives yet that may not be need to, like going, oh my gosh, what's going on? Is there a fire? And maybe it's like, okay, we're making sure we handle it. So for us, being able that what Blameless solves, especially as a smaller shop on this one, is the fact that as I talked about it before, the integrations with so many platforms that all I had to do was make sure that they paired together, that they made sure that they were set, that the right people were involved based on how we defined it as a company, and then they're ready to go. So that way, when something occurs, the right people are there. It all happens. It's all automated. They're not trying to bend like, oh my gosh, I need to get in this channel, or I need to have a Zoom instance spun up, or I need to have a confluence document made for this one. It's already done. It's already there. They have it. They go. They focus on the incident that's occurred instead of having to us spin up these instances or create these things or permission things out because it's already done. And that just, that's
Cool.
that speed to need is so impressive with Blameless, and something that we always go and say, yeah, that's great, especially because, I'm looking at the incident going, okay, is it internal or is it external? But, from the sense of
Right.
it, I don't want to have to always constantly spin up all the other things when they're ready to go.
So you mentioned integration a lot, and I want to come back and focus on integration a little bit. Um, you mentioned the integration with your existing tools was a big driver because it brought everything together, which is great.
Mhm.
Let's talk about some of those integrations. Which ones were, the most critical, or which ones were the biggest? Let's focus on which ones were the most critical for you to get connected to first, and then let's talk about which ones had the biggest benefits to you
Sure.
from an integration standpoint. So, which ones were the biggest, most important ones first?
Definitely the big two for us, and I think I probably mentioned them both at this point: Slack and Jira.
Yep.
That one, hands down, the
Yeah.
two biggest
Okay.
ones, no doubt about it. Slack for the communication piece internally on this, and Jira for making sure that we can attach it to the correct project that we have, so that way our engineering team is right on it, already there, already automatically added to their board, so that way it's not, oh, spin up the Slack channel and then go ahead over here and now spin up a Jira call on that one. Boom. One instance, Blameless has done both. We're good to go. On that one, I call it maybe the second tier on this one, or our second step down. Obviously, Zoom. Sometimes it's needed, sometimes it's not, depending on what the level is, kind of to be able to create that war room automatically that people are going in. And then we have a recording of it that if we wanted to go back and look, it's like, oh, what did we handle when an incident XYZ came up? How did we handle that one? And then kind of from there, really, I think for us, probably, I think those were probably the big three on that one, or kind of the second set. I don't really know if we went too much deeper on that because those really kind of sufficed a lot of what we needed. And we already had our Zendesk instance kind of tied in with our Jira instance. So that was already getting linked there. So it kind of created the full circle of that one, and that we always had these communications, or we also was keeping up to date all at once. So it wasn't like we were missing anything, where before we were like, well, this is here, this is here, this is here, this is here. And now it's all together.
So your customer support team was primarily focused on the Zendesk, which
Yep.
is already integrated into Jira. So the
Yep.
Jira integration with Blameless, and the Slack integration with Blameless basically allowed you to take the tools you were already using, namely Jira, Zendesk pair,
Yep.
and Slack, which you were using for communications, and integrate them together. It's essentially
Mhm.
what it's able to help you do.
Yep.
And Zoom for in-person conversational style incidents when that communication was necessary. What about things like PagerDuty and that sort of thing? Did you use tools like that, and how did they fit into this process?
We haven't really got into that one. That's sort of a next evolution of our company and sort of what we're looking at with the help of Blameless is now starting to find that status tool that we can roll out. And that's one of the things we've started an initiative as our company is how do we have that customer facing when we have something like this that it's automatically done? Because right now it's sort of, again, it's still sort of a manual process, but like I said, we're still small, medium business. And as we're growing in that one, that's something we would love to be able to tie in with Blameless, to being able to say, all right, it's already out there. Now, being that we are a smaller company on this, we don't really have those on-call rotations like a lot of teams do, where we don't have, engineering departments overnight or on that one. So things like having to make sure that we were getting people involved from the sense of, hey, we're running a 24/7 shop really isn't a thing for us yet on that one. I'm sure it'll come up sooner than later. And I hope it does. That's great for the company on that point. But really, for now, that was sort of like one that we looked at and said, wow, it's a great thing. We're really just not there yet. But we want to eventually get into where it's more customer focused of like, okay, look at we have this incident. It's already boom, it's hitting our status page on that one, almost like an ops genie will do or a status page.io that kind of does like boom, it's there.
Right.
You see it, you're out there, and then you know that something has occurred.
Makes sense. Makes sense. So I'd like to remind people who are listening, if you have any questions, please put it into either the chat or into the open questions, and we'll try and address them. But let's let's end with one final big area of conversation, and that is retrospectives, and how you handle post-incident response, and how do you make sure that incidents don't repeat, and all that sort of stuff. What does an incident retrospective mean to you and your company?
So an interesting retrospective for us is being able to identify, like obviously we looked at the incident, we made sure we handled the incident. There was a lot of moving pieces on, but really going back and looking and saying, okay, what really happened? Was it something that we could control? Was it something that was outside of our control? Who were the people that were involved with this? What was the ultimate thing that we found that was the issue? What was something that we did to remedy this situation? Is it a repeatable one that we can do again and maybe in the future? Or was this just a one-off of, something like, I'll just take AWS, for example. AWS happened to go out. If the Eastern New York AWS goes down, I don't think, unfortunately, there's not much we can do that on that point at that one. But, that's to us being able to have that. And as I mentioned before, is it going into confluence so that we can look back and something else. As a data-driven company and something that we do as being a performance marketing tool, we are constantly handling data on that one of, we have data partners, things are ingesting into our one, they're ingesting into our platforms. So sometimes we do have these things come up where our incident tools or sorry, our data tools aren't always, not always working. Sometimes the file comes in wrong or something else handles it. So it's being able to look back and go from one side of it, okay, was this our system that took it wrong? Or was it their system that took it wrong? And then from there as well, looking at it going, okay, then was this something that's happened multiple times? Maybe we need to talk to the vendor about this, about is there something on your side? Or maybe it's our side. Is our engineering
Mhm.
platform that we have just not ingesting this correctly? So having all that documentation, especially as a company, as you mentioned, remotely and as we're growing, so that way we can look back and go, okay, in the calendar year, how many incidents did we have? If there's 17 of them that happen with data partners, maybe we need to have a discussion with them about like, hey, we've seen these kind of things. Have you guys seen this before? Is this something else you're experiencing with other customers versus, maybe something like, oh gosh, we just had, a weird outage that happened because AWS went down, okay, there's just a one-off. That's something we had to notify about just to make sure people knew, but not something to be able to, hopefully doesn't happen that often on that point. So it really is something that we look back and use as a company because we've really tried to standardize. And I give my engineering team a lot of credit for this and our product team about how our Confluence documents are written up, how things go, how we are able to handle things. And, that's one of the nice things with Blameless is it has those sort of questions that'll automatically kick over into from the retrospective of what kind of things of what I just mentioned. Who was involved? Who were the people that were there? How was it handled? Who was this an internal or external event? So on and so forth as that one. And it's something that, again, we don't have to make this document every time and do this one. A lot of that information is already there from either the Slack conversations, like screenshots, for example, and such, and moving it over instead of having to go copy from Slack, move it over, So there's obviously some tweaking you have to do at the end, but not like creating this whole document and spending all this time. And it's that automation really helps our teams especially on our customer support team and the ones that they look back, our engineering team. So that way they're not having to write this long document that may take them a couple hours instead of, they may be taking 10, 15 minutes just to make sure that the information looks correct and making some edits here or there.
So do you share your retrospectives with, obviously with the rest of your teams, but are they shared with your customers?
That I'm not sure of. I think it's more kept as an internal thing at that one at this time, but I can't really speak to that part of the business.
No problem, no problem. So one of the things I like to talk about when it comes to retrospectives is point of data versus point of action, right?
Mhm.
So a lot of retrospective summaries are become great source of data for figuring out what things to do later. So going back and looking at past retrospectives can help you um, inform your future product roadmap, your product plans for, here we've been having this problem repeatedly. We should probably look at doing something different here, and, or whatever. And maybe process tuning versus code tuning, but it can affect both. I call that point of data, but also they can be helpful from a point of action standpoint. An incident occurred. One of the things we did at Amazon when I worked there is very much focused on do not repeat, right? And so the fact that a incident occurred, it was imperative that we put a process in place to make sure that particular incident will not occur again. And so the net result of this, what it boils down to is not only do we have data for our database that we can use to evaluate and change product roadmaps in the future, but we also created specific action items that were expected to be processed immediately, fixed immediately, issues that needed to be dealt with right away to prevent this particular incident from occurring again. I call those the points of action. Um, did you do that as well? Did you come up with, during the incident retrospective standpoint, not only data for future use, but specific actions of tasks to take now in order to make sure that the incidents didn't occur?
Oh, absolutely. That absolutely is something and that's kind of the greatest part of having the retrospectives, right? Because of being able to do that analysis of, like you said, whether you have that point of action of that one or not of that. And that is something I think is growing on our team as well, of being able to realize that now that we are getting this data that may not necessarily have been there once before, but now that we are growing this one and being able to see that, which ultimately, hopefully, you don't have a lot of incidences. It's great if you don't have a lot of data, let's say that of that part of it. But now that we have those ones, we've actually helped reduce a lot of the issues that we have. And one thing I mentioned before, the data partners, we used to have actually a lot more incidents occur around our data partners before. And then once now seeing where some of those pain points occurred or where some of these have won, we've kind of shifted some things, changed on our side, worked with them a little bit. We're seeing less on that one. So actually, because of the help of Blameless and some of those ones pushing that in, it's helped us reduce those ones that we've had once before, which directly helps keep our uptime with our customers and keeps our customers a lot happier on that one, which is great
Right,
by the end
right.
of the day too. You want that as much for anybody.
Definitely, definitely. So let's end today with one big, I guess I would call it a philosophical question. So, how would you respond to this question? How did incident management, excuse me, how did incident management techniques that you put into place since you've added Blameless and added the SOX 2 processes and requirements, how did those techniques transform how you think about making your product better?
That's a great question. So, to me, by adding in Blameless and being able to standardize a lot of what we've done across the company for handling incidences and creating that, what it's done for us is really making sure that when we are a data-driven company and we get a lot of data in, right, that basically that just like what we're doing and what we're asking our customers to put the trust in us of that one, of us because we're Trustengine and that one, we're not total pun there, but we're really looking at trying to be able to say that as a company, what data do we have of this of we're trying to go through? So when I'm looking at this, of looking at all these different ones, this has really helped us create a better product because we're able to focus on the things that we want to focus on, advancements in the product, advancements in the technology we're doing, how we're handling it, instead of always trying to work on things on the other side of, oh, this is broken, that's broken, this doesn't work right, this customers, which always happens. There's always things that you can
Right,
tweak,
right.
you're going to change on this one. But because we have such great intel now from how we've standardized things, we've understand the processes better, we've actually sort of understand our own product a little bit better because we've seen when these things come up, we're already looking at it and going, oh, I've already seen that before. We've seen that happen. How do we make sure that that doesn't happen again on that one? Or on the sense of we have the data there to look at it and go, you know what? This is something new to us. What happened on this one? Why did this happen on this one, or having to do it? So when those things do occur, it's a lot less frequent than it once was. And I can't stress how great that has been going from, I'll call it like maybe mid 22 on that one when we kind of got things adopted to where we are now in 2024. The amount of incidences that we've seen and the amount of ones has drastically decreased, which has only just put more trust in our customers to make sure our product is working on that one that they're obviously subscribing for, but also making us better as a company because our engineering teams and our product team can really focus on that bigger picture we always liked about that next innovation, that next iteration of it, because we're not trying to just do, all right, we got to, what reconfiguration do we have to do because we didn't know why this broke. Kind of think of that one.
Well, great. Thank you, Lash. Thank you very much for your candid conversation here. I want to before we end the webinar, I do want to mention a couple of announcements to everyone who's listening in here. First one is I want to reiterate the Bamboo HR case study, which I believe there is a link now in the chat for that. I also want to mention that we have a new ebook out that you may be interested in reading. It's called Preventing Burnout with Reliability Practices. And I'll ask Aaron or Sarah to make sure there's a link for that. I see he says there's a link coming, and it should be in the chat here shortly. And I also want to mention our next webinar, which is coming up in 2 weeks. So my friends and colleagues, Ken Gabranovich and Jim Gochi, will join me again for a webinar. 2 weeks ago, you may remember we had a highly successful webinar with the three of us, and we're going to be expanding on the same topics we talked about then. This one will be titled From New Relic to AWS, The Secrets of Creating a Blameless Culture. And we're going to focus a lot on the cultural aspects of incident management. I hope you can join us. Aaron, or I guess Sarah, it looks like you just put a link in. Please take a look at the chat. There is a link in the chat now for that webinar as well. And once again, my guest today has been Devon Lash. Lash is the principal IT specialist at Trustengine, and Trustengine is a blameless customer. Lash, I want to thank you very much for joining me today. And I want to thank everyone who's listening in. Thank you for joining me, and I hope you have a great day.
Thank you,
Goodbye.
Lee. I appreciate it. Bye, everyone.